In this lesson, I'm going to suggest a programming exercise, a full programming exercise, that should help to put all of these details together and make the REST-style web service a bit more comprehensible, especially for programmers. What programmers understand is code, and we learn by writing code. So that's the spirit of this exercise. To that end, I have a working file. It's called exerciserest.txt. It summarizes some points. I don't want to read through it. I will refer to it from time to time. Let me instead take a more informal approach and talk about the spirit of this exercise. The first thing you have to decide, of course, is what framework you're going to use. So the three that we've covered, the HTTP servlet, JAX RS, and RESTlet, of those three, the servlet, of course, is the simplest, and the other two represent a layer of software above the servlet. So I'd pick one of these three, and I wouldn't worry too much about which one. For example, if you pick the simplest, HTTP servlet, in the course of doing the exercise, you may wind up finding that there are features you would very much like to have, but don't have. For example, the servlet is not especially good at RESTful routing. It gives you the do get, the do post, and so on. But if you have variations, for example, on get requests, get plain, get XML, and so on, you would have to handle those, in effect, internally within the do get method. You'd have to farm those requests out to other methods that you would have written. If you were using JAX RS or RESTlet, by contrast, you'd have more direct control over the routing. But this is something that would really come to the fore in using the HTTP servlet framework. If you pick one of the other two, JAX RS or RESTlet, you're going to find that there's a level of complexity, and we've seen that complexity. There's a level of complexity that you don't run into with the servlet example. For instance, the web.xml configuration file becomes more complicated because you've got the so-called interceptor pattern. So whichever framework you pick, I think you'll get an appreciation of what the other frameworks have to offer by way of contrast. So let me now summarize what I think are the main points. I'm simply going to do a very quick run-through. So in the exercise, you should implement the 4 CRUD operations. You want to do as much with RESTful routing as you can. In particular, the spirit of REST-style services nowadays is to give equal emphasis to the verb and the noun in a route. So, for example, we've seen that a URI verb combination such as get predictions would lead you one place, whereas the combination post predictions would lead you someplace else. So this is the equal weighting of verb and noun. You should take advantage of what HTTP offers. Again, this is in the spirit of REST. You have status codes that let the requester know how the request went. 200, of course, is always good news. Something in the 400 range is always bad news. The MIME types can be used to determine whether the requester gets an XML response, a JSON response, a plain text response, or something else. In terms of data, I would not worry about that very much. So, for example, in this first full exercise, I wouldn't bother going to a real database, although that's always an option. The different variants of the prediction service that we've seen hardwire the data in a text file, predictions.db, which in turn is packed into the deployed WAR file. Again, that code you can take a look at, and I'd suggest even borrow straightforwardly to avoid sort of the data processing side of things. The Adages service takes an even simpler approach. It has the data as an array of strings. That array of strings is then transformed into a thread-safe list of adages. I'd minimize the complexity of data and focus instead on the REST style. Let me hit this bullet point. It is important to support thread safety. So to that end, the central data structure should be a thread-safe data structure, and the 2 attractive ones are the ones that we've seen so far. There's the concurrent hash map and the copy on write array list. These are really powerful data structures. Both are part of java.util.concurrent. And I think getting used to using them is a very nice thing as well. If you get the chance, I would make this probably optional. I would do something with data validation. The way all data validation is done nowadays, if it's done seriously, is through regular expressions. So I'd get my feet wet playing with that as well. So good luck with the exercise. Just getting something done is more important than the particulars. So I'd approach this exercise in that spirit.